All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 5 of the Common Knowledge Podcast, a Magic the Gathering podcast about improving your skills in the Pauper format. I'm your host, Brandon Clark, and joined with me is my co-host, Rafael Castro. Rafael, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you doing, Brandon?
Doing awesome. It's a beautiful, foggy, rainy day here in Utah. What's
Nice.
it like in Brazil?
Well, it's foggy as well. It's really raining a lot here these last days. But I think it's nice. I like rainy days.
Awesome. So, as you probably are noticing, Raphael and myself, we are slightly different than the hosts that you're used to. Um, so, maybe we'll take a few minutes. We'll go in and do a quick introduction before we move into the show. So, Raphael, do you want to start?
Sweet, yeah. So I would like to start by saying how much I'm pleased with this opportunity to be part of a podcast, which is devoted to discuss Pauper. So I am sure we will have a lot of fun while trying our best to become better players, because that's at least my goal. Well, about me, as Brandon said, I'm from Brazil, and not a lot of people know that, but we have a very, very strong pauper community over here. A lot of players and a lot of content creators as well. So, I started playing MTG at the kitchen table sometime around the Urza's block. And some few years later, I abandoned the game altogether, and I only started playing again a little bit before I started doing my master's in literature. Around this time, Battle for Zendikar was soon to be released, so a friend of mine and myself, we started researching on the internet to see which format we could afford to play, because students are kind of broke. So we discovered about Pauper, and we immediately started playing Pauper. We built a Pauper cube, we built some decks, and I haven't stopped playing since then. And I fell in love with this format. It's pretty much my favorite format right now. How about you, Brandon? What's your story on MTG?
Well, my story. See, I've been playing Magic for about 4 years now, maybe 5. Started in playing Standard and Modern, and then was getting kind of bored with that and wanted to venture into some of the more eternal formats. And so I started playing Legacy. And then my friend, who is actually a Pauper content creator himself, he does a bit of streaming. He goes by Lobert on YouTube. He actually started me on Pauper through his cube. He had a Pauper cube, and it was one of the most fun experiences I've ever had playing Magic. I was blown away by how powerful the interactions of the cards were. Because you think commons only, like this is going to be like playing a powered down limited format, but there's some insanely powerful cards printed at commons. So from there, I started looking at deck lists, building my own decks, playing, and now I'm just head deep into the format, and it's awesome.
Sweet.
Right. So before we get into the main topic of the show, quick shout out to our sponsors, Pure MTGO. Check them out. They've got awesome content, anything from standard to modern, legacy, pauper. You can find articles, deck lists, anything you need. They're a great source for MTG content. And we'll move into our card of the week. Our card of the week this week is Gush.
Yeah.
So, Raphael, talk to us a bit about Gush.
Okay, well, we all know how good of a card Gush is. It has been around for a while and has seen playing many decks, especially Delver decks, and nowadays preeminent combo decks as well, like Izzet Blitz and Tireless Tribe combo. So, it's not a new card, but we have reasons for why to talk about this card. Lately, Delver decks they have seen a really kind of a resurgence. At least they started putting up results again online, and this kind of shows how good of a card Gush really is, because it's a really important part of the deck. So just something here for those who want a written in-depth analysis on Gush. I recommend Alex Zollman's article called Gushing Over Gush. He discusses the card pretty well. So the first thing that makes this card great, obviously, the ability to cast it without paying its 5 mana cost by returning 2 islands to our hands. This may be seen as a drawback, and technically is, but it is most of the times more like a beneficial tool that resets our land drops, and by floating mana and dropping the land afterwards, gives us the impression of generating an additional land drop. So this is, just by that, the card is great. And of course, the effect is drawing 2 cards. One very important thing to say about the card is that for us to really benefit from the spell, we should almost always cast the card on our turn at sorcery speed, despite the fact that it's actually an instant spell. Brandon, why do we do that?
Well, that's actually something that's hard to answer, I think, because it's very unintuitive, right? We're kind of conditioned to cast instants on our opponent's turn, and that's sort of the upside of an instant, right? Is that we can use our mana on our opponent's turn and then untap on our turn, and then have access to that mana again. A card like Gush, however, because of the returning the islands to your hand, if you're using that on your opponent's end step, you're really losing out on a lot of mana during your main phase. And so gushing main phase, before, say, you make an attack, can be really beneficial to you, and it can kind of help you like ramp up to, in a way. So you can float your 2 mana, return your islands to your hand, play one of those islands, and now you have 3 mana, whereas before you had 2. So if you were going to miss a land drop, that's a way to get more land into play and more mana.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing is that we should cast Gush not only on our pre-combat step or our pre-combat main phase. I found out that an additional, a very interesting use of Gush when you're playing Blue-Red Delver, or just mono blue Delver, is to use it in combat combined with the Ninja Trickery. Because, by floating 2 mana right before paying for ninjutsu, we make sure we will have something to spend our mana on. So we draw 3 cards subsequently, of course, and by the time we do that, we will probably be very, very far ahead in the game, or at least we will catch on and be able to stabilize the board, or have some answers we may be needing. So Gush main phase and Gush combat phase, if you're playing Delver decks, are really the best use of the card. Of course, there will be times when we will be forced to cast Gush on the opponent's turn to find an answer for any threats that might be pointed our way. In these cases, most of the time, I think we are already in a very difficult position, and 2 things can happen. We will probably lose the game shortly after, or we will be very lucky and find the perfect answer that buys us a few more turns or puts us in a much better position, I guess. Yeah. And there's also another very nice trick that Alex points out in his article. By casting Gush and casting Brainstorm afterwards, we can get 2 unnecessary lands or and other cards that we don't need back to our libraries, and then shuffle it afterwards by cycling Ash Barrens or even cracking an Evolving Wilds or so. So it's a very nice trick to get rid of 2 cards you don't need at the moment. So it's quite a versatile card, don't you think?
Yeah, there's a lot you can do with it. And you alluded earlier to using Gush in tempo decks like Delver, but also combo decks. Talk to me about the difference in how that card plays between the 2 decks. Is there a difference in how I'm casting Gush in a combo deck versus a tempo aggressive deck like Delver?
Yeah, I think that while we have to have a perfect time when casting Gush in tempo decks, if we are playing combo decks, our Gush should be much more proactively and aggressively. We should cast it more aggressively. So that means if we cast Gush while playing a combo deck, it's a really, really powerful card. It's a powerhouse because by casting Gush, we add 2 cards to our hands, and these 2 new cards, they mean something. They mean if we're playing Tireless Tribe combo, they mean we have +8 power for our Tireless Tribe in that turn by discarding these 2 cards. That also means that we may have drawn a response to something like a Giga Draws or a Counter Magic. And if we're playing Kill Fiend, all we want actually is to have cards in hand, play cantrips, play stuff that can pump up our beaters. So we should cast Gush much more proactively in those types of decks. And in Delver decks, we should have an impeccable timing on exactly when to cast Gush. So it's the same card, but it's a very, very different use of the card that we're aiming for. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you hit it right on. A card like Gush just has so much mobility in how it plays. And there, like you said, picking your spots is really crucial. You know, when you're playing a reactive deck like Delver, you know, knowing when the proper time to Gush is really crucial in being able to interact with your opponent efficiently. And in your combo decks, just knowing your spots, you know, knowing when to go for it and go all in on the Gush and your Tireless Tribe, and when you're kind of going to be using your Gush more to build up resources so that you can have your critical turn where you go off. It's one of those things that takes a lot of practice and is probably one of the harder aspects of Magic, is a card like Gush.
Yeah, I agree.
So let's move on to our main topic for the week. And this topic, since this is kind of our first episode together, Raphael and I, we kind of wanted to just go through and do a metagame breakdown, talk about the current state of the Pauper meta, how we feel about it, what decks to expect if you're going to be playing a league online, or even if you're going to be playing in one of the Pauper challenges. So let's just get right into it. The Pauper metagame. So Raphael, what are you seeing when you're playing Magic Online?
Well, I think the meta is quite open right now. For some reason, since the new influx of cards, the meta has become more diverse, and some decks have fallen out of flavor, while some other decks have seen sort of a resurgence. But it's a wide open meta. By looking at MTG Goldfish, just a sec here. We see that there are different archetypes being represented in the, I guess, top 8 decks in popularity, like Stompy, which is an aggro deck, Tron, that have its iterations that varies around control and combo. We have Elves, and Elves is a fine case because Elves returned very strong to the scene after Lead the Stampede became legal. Besides Elves, we have Coldota Boros, Burn, Izzet Blitz, Mono Blue Delver, Affinity, and stuff. But my impression by playing some leagues is that, and I guess the last few leagues I played, I never faced the same deck twice, which is an indicator that there's no deck, there's no really dominant deck which is being played by everyone, you know? So I played against Burn, Bogos, stuff I didn't think I would play against, like Slivers, which is another deck that benefited from Lead the Stampede. So yeah, my opinion is that it's quite a diverse meta right now. Though I have the impression that because of the challenges results, people will start playing more Delver again. I don't know. It's just a question about popularity, I guess.
Okay, because a while, not too long ago, we had a huge resurgence around the time, or not resurgence, but around the time Burning Tree Emissary was printed at Common. We saw this mono green Stompy deck really break through. And it felt like that deck kind of started to push mono blue Delver decks aside. And that's really when the decks started integrating red and started playing the snow-covered lands so that they could splash Lightning Bolt and Scred into their decks. But it seems like we've been seeing a huge resurgence, like you said, of Delver. What do you think is contributing to that?
Well, I think it's precisely the fact that the meta is open. Because Delver, and I would say especially Blue-Red Delver, is kind of a neutral deck that doesn't have awful matches. I mean, there's some hard matches to win, but it's kind of a neutral deck in the sense that it has game against most of the decks. Because it's a tempo deck. I mean, you can outplay aggro sometimes. You can get under mid-range decks. You can take the aggro role and beat control decks too. So tempo is really by definition and a very versatile deck because it can play the aggro game and it can also play the control game. So I guess that's the main reason. Of course, there is the popularity reason too, because we all know that if some decks starts to taking first place in challenges, most of the times people will start playing the exact same list of the winner. So people like to play decks they think is a great deck. Oh, it won the challenge, so I must be able to I don't know, to win a league with it. Popularity has its role as well, but mainly it's the fact that the meta is wide open and has all the archetypes represented.
Okay. In other formats like Legacy, one of the constraints is often cost. And so when you're playing Legacy online, you'll see a lot more decks like Burn than you would at a normal paper event. That obviously does not really exist in Pauper because you can, you know, feasibly play any deck you want for next to nothing. So kind of, do you think though that we're going to have players just playing the decks they want to play?
Yeah, I hope so. And I think that players already do that in some way, because as I said before, people started playing Slivers again. People know that Slivers is not really a great deck, but with the addition of Lead the Stampede, the deck now has its way of refilling the hand with threats, which it hasn't had for the past of the deck. So it's a better deck now. It's not a great deck, but believe me or not, if you're playing some leagues, you'll face Sliver sometimes, and it's a deck that is able to win as well. It's not a bad deck. And other decks that were kind of out of flavor or were not great decks to be playing the recent meta were this more controlly blue-black decks. And I found out they're back. A lot of blue-black decks are putting up results in the leagues. And Dimir Alchemy variations and even teachings is kind of doing well. And it wasn't for a long time. So yeah, I think people will play what they want to play. And if being the meta quite open as it is now, it's the perfect opportunity to play the deck you want to play, because you always have a chance. I mean, people are playing all sorts of decks right now, even janky brews and stuff.
So you touched a bit on these control decks, but if you look at, MTG Top 8 and MTG Goldfish and look at deck lists, the metagame is largely creature-based decks. So this includes aggro decks like Stompy and Boros Metalcraft, Boros Monarch, and then it even moves into some of the more combo-type decks like Kiln Fiend and the tempo decks like Delver. There's actually very little control decks. I think the most popular one is probably Tron.
Yeah,
variations.
Despite being a deck which is very, very difficult to play online because of the time and all the clicking you have to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It's like a very creature-based meta right now. But even those control decks, they are at some point creature-based, like Tron. For you have to have Mulldrifters and Mnemonic Walls, maybe Seagate Oracles in order for the deck to work. Blue-black Alchemy, which is more like a mid-range deck, I guess, but can really play the control game, also relies on creatures for the win, like Gurmag Angler, Augur of Bolas to get the spells and stuff. So yeah, definitely is a very creature-based meta. And why do you think the reason for that is?
Well, looking at it and even thinking about it, like even the most pure control deck in the format, which is probably Blue-Black Teachings, has very few real win conditions. You can get there with Capsize, or the
Curse of the Bloody Tome?
No, what's the Wrath with buyback? -2/-2.
Evenkar's Justice.
Evenkar's Justice. Yeah, I couldn't remember. I knew it was Justice something. Evenkar's Justice. You can sometimes get there with Evenkar's Justice. Like you have pristine talismans to try to catch you up on life, but sometimes like your life total is just pressured too much, and so that deck has fallen onto Gurmag Angler as kind of its real win condition.
Yeah,
and so even these.
Go on.
Well, even just the most pure control deck is still relying on creatures to kill, and I think that just has to do with one, the lack of sweepers in the format. Removal is not necessarily limited because there's a lot of good removal, but it's what's the word I'm looking for? Wow, my mind just like went blank. It's like when it's not just outright like destroy target creature. You know, like even Doomblade, destroy target non-black creature. You have Disfigure, -2/-2 to a creature. So your
Yeah,
removal,
they're kind of narrow removals, right?
it's narrow. Yeah, your removal is narrow. That's exactly the term I was looking for. And so that really puts a strain on the control decks, knowing what removal spells to use when, what removal spells you need to save, and knowing when, like, I need to counter this because I don't have a removal spell that can handle this threat. And so I think that puts a constraint on the control decks, as well as the lack of a really powerful finisher for a control deck. So they need to fall back onto these creatures.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think when we have a very creature-based format, it becomes hard for these control decks to put up results because they are normally time-consuming, and also they rely on permission and removal. And as you said, in Pauper, there's a lack of a board wipe or a global removal. Besides Swirling Sandstorm and Avankar's Justice, and Crypt Rats, I guess, we don't have a very, very efficient board wipe. But I think that even though creatures are being favored in this format of ours, there is still space for control decks. Because, like Tron, for instance, Mirazatron, it's a very, very versatile type of control deck. And it also has its finishers. I mean, finishing the deck by Rolling Thunder, mostly. Maybe you can capsize all of the opponent's stuff. Maybe you can cast a big threat like Ulamog's Crush and protect it. So we have, we as control players, we have stuff to play. We are not in that bad of a spot. And yeah, I mean, that's it. We have to acknowledge the fact that the format is primarily creature-based, and control decks will strive to overcome this difficulty of having all the answers all the time, which is impossible, no matter how many great new board wipes are added to the format. So I would like to say that despite of all that we just talked about, and the fact that MTG Goldfish points out that the most popular decks are aggro and mid-range decks and combo decks, I would like to say that we have indeed all archetypes represented in the current meta. At least that is my impression by playing some leagues and by seeing the challenges results. We have aggro decks like Stompy, which this day seems to be a little less played than, let's say, 2 months ago. We have mid-range decks like Boros Variations, Blue-Black Alchemy, and Mono-Black Control, running the Black Monarch creature. We have control decks like Blue-Black Variations, more control variations. We have Blue-Green Tron, not Blue-Green Tron, we have Mirazatron. We have sometimes people playing Izzet Puzzle. We have combo decks like Izzet Blitz, Tireless Tribe, and Jinrova Tron, and Blue-Green Tron, which are kind of a combo-y variants of Tron. We have Elves, of course, which is kind of a combo deck. And we have, of course, the ever-present tempo decks in the form of Delver Variations. And all of these decks are being piloted by very capable players and being taken to top 8 on challenges and making 5-0s on leagues. So yeah, I think the format is quite healthy. We have all types of decks, although mostly all of them are creature-based decks, which I do not think it's a bad thing at all.
No, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing either. But I do think it's important to try to identify when we're looking at the meta. so that you can understand how to design, how to build your deck, and how to create your sideboards, and what your strategies and plans should be in individual matchups. Knowing that, you know, this control deck is probably going to draw a lot more cards than me. They're going to have a lot more removal, a lot of counter spells. But really, what I need to do is make sure I fight over their Gurmag Angler and try to, you know, beat their other spells in a different way. You know, whether that's saving a bunch of counter spells for their cap size, if that's what they're going for, or whatever. But knowing the decks, knowing your matchups, and understanding what cards are critical and crucial go a long way. And so understanding that the meta is very creature based is going to help you with that a lot. But again, like you said, that's not really a bad thing, being really creature based. Some of the funnest games of Magic have a lot of creatures in them, and I think that players naturally gravitate towards using creatures. They just feel more interactive, and you're, you know, battling in combat, bumping heads. So
yeah, and we should always consider that a lot of people like playing like old school Magic, which by old school I mean kitchen table Magic. When you started to play, you like to have big creatures or a lot of creatures, just attack, beat face, and be happy with it. And there's no problem with that. I mean, Stompy, it's a very nice and cool deck to play, and it's just about creatures.
Yeah, nothing feels better than just smashing people in the face with a zombie fish.
Yeah, right.
You know, but so we've kind of touched on a few of these aggro decks and the control decks, and we've talked a tiny bit about these combo decks. But all the combo decks that we've listed, they are all completely creature based. Elves, we're going to kind of lump that into the aggro combo. The Tireless Tribe decks, that's definitely the combo deck of the format. You know, there are infinite combo loops with cards like Prosperous Pirates, Mnemonic Wall, Mole Drifters, and all of these tie into Ghostly Flicker as the linchpin card. But still, these decks are very much creature-based, and if they don't draw their creatures, they kind of fall apart. Or if you have a removal spell, you know, that Ghostly Flicker is really bad. You know, if you're able to kill the creature they're flickering in response, like, that's just kind of a dead card now, and you've really thrown them back on the tempo. So really, a lot of these decks, just understanding not only the dynamic of how they work, but just having the right removal and knowing how to interact with their creatures is going to be really crucial for success within this format, I think.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about some new cards that can or could see play on the current meta?
Yeah, let's touch on a few of those really quick. We talked a little bit earlier about Lead the Stampede and how that card is kind of bumped Elves up a touch in power level, but also kind of helped Slivers break out again, and people are playing a lot more of that, and it certainly seems to be a powerful spell.
Yes, it is. I mean, it's just a card that... do you want to read a card for us?
Yeah, let me... so Lead the Stampede is... I have to pull up my Gatherer before started. So Lead the Stampede was first printed in Mirrodin Besieged?
I guess so, yeah.
And it was printed at Uncommon, and it recently was printed at Common in Eternal Masters or Iconic Masters?
Iconic
Masters. Okay, so it was printed at Common and Iconic Masters, but Lead the Stampede is 2 generic and a green for a sorcery that says, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal any number of creature cards from among them and put the revealed cards into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order.
So yeah, it's Spear Gas. For Slivers, which didn't have no card at all to fill this role, it's a very powerful card. And on elves, well, elves had Distant Melody, the blue one. It's a sorcerer, or I don't know if it's an instant spell or a sorcery spell, but Distant Melody allows you to buy cards equal to the number of creatures of the chosen type you have. So elves had that, but it was at blue. Now elves has a new spell to refill the hand, to refill the board, because you have a ton of mana on elves, which doesn't rely upon having a blue mana source at play. And that is quite good. I mean, people started playing it, tested it a lot, and it definitely works, but we still have very different opinions from players. Few players want to stick to Distant Melody for some reason. Other players took off the island of the deck and took off Sylvan Ranger, which is the elf that can find basic lands, and started playing just green, having 4 Lead the Stampede main deck. And of course, there are other players which are playing both, maybe 4 Lead the Stampede and 2 Distant Melodies, or the other way around. I mean, you can do whatever you want with these 2 cards. They fill the exact same role, and it's almost a thing of taste. If you like the idea of just playing a pure green elves deck, well, you can do that now. If you like splashing blue for Distant Melody, go on, keep on splashing blue, because Distant Melody is still a great card. It was not replaced. My feeling is that we have now we have now redundancy. Though the cards are different, they fill the exact same role, so we have redundancy, and being elves a very powerful deck when it combos off. This kind of redundancy is pretty much all we need to be sure that we will have a very, very massive board presence and start doing broken things before the opponent can stabilize the game or be a threat to us. So yeah, the card is great. It's being played mostly in these 2 decks we mentioned. And I guess that's it.
Okay. What do you think about Entourage of Trest? So that was a card printed in the Conspiracy Take the Crown. And so how long has that been available on Magic Online?
I guess a month and a little bit, I guess. It's been available since it came in treasure chests.
Mm-hmm.
Around the time, actually at the same time, the Iconic Masters downshifted cards became legal as well.
Okay. So Entourage of Trest is a creature elf for 4 generic and a green, and it says when Entourage of Trest enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. And he has an additional block of text that says he can block 1 additional creature each combat as long as you are the monarch. And he is a 4/4. This card hasn't really made like a big splash yet, has it?
No, it hasn't. Well, first of all, being the monarch is great. It's kind of a broken mechanic. But Entourage of Trest being green, that it means that the card doesn't have a lot of homes to be played. Because, I mean, I tested it on blue-green Tron. It was pretty much underwhelming, because you have already so many ways to draw cards. You don't really need to become the monarch. Elves, people speculated that elves would like to play the card. I don't really think so. And it's not the case. I haven't seen any list which has put up any results playing the card. So although it's a great card, it seems like a really great card in a vacuum. I don't think it has a nice home, at least not right now. Maybe if we had the tools to make a nice mono green mid-range deck, the card would be great. But I don't think we have this kind of tools right now. What do you think of that? Do we have the possibility to, I don't know, try to brew a green mid-range deck playing it Entourage of Stress?
I think the card is really powerful, but it kind of just doesn't have a home right now. But I don't know. Pauper is kind of a brewer's paradise because of how balanced the power level of most cards are. That if you get a card as powerful as Entourage of Tress that has the Monarch ability, I think that you should be able to find something, whether that's like a mid-range deck or if it fits into, you know, maybe a bug or Sultai control deck. Not really sure, but I think it's a really powerful card worth exploring. Let's talk about a few more of these cards before we move on to our Pauper Challenge breakdown. I know you were kind of excited about Jace's Phantasm.
Yeah.
What's the deal with that card? Because it seems on the surface really powerful, but...
Well, yeah, Jace's Phantasm is a blue creature. It costs 1 blue mana. It's 1/1 flying. It has flying, and if the opponent has, I guess, 10 or more cards in his graveyard, Jace's Phantasm gets +4/+4. So yeah, it seems like a very powerful card. And I have played against decks which were running Jace's Phantasm. One of them was a mono blue mill deck running Jace's Erasure, Jace's Phantasm, some mill spells, and yeah, game 1, the deck totally wrecked me because I was definitely not prepared to deal with two Jace's Erasure, and in the late game, 2 Jace's Phantasms. I was playing Blue-Red Delver. But game 2 and game 3, those 2 games were quite easy because you already know what to expect from the deck. And Jace's Phantasm become a kind of a fragile card. It maybe if it had hexproof, it would be pretty powerful. But being just a 5/5 flyer in a format that has a lot of removal, it's not that big of a deal, you know. And
yeah,
yeah, go on.
Well, I was just gonna comment to the fact that we're playing a mill deck, but then we're taking up 4 of our mill slots for a situational creature that's like, yeah, it's probably always going to be a 5/5 in your deck because you're trying to mill, but like, won't you just have an easier time winning if you just make those more mill cards and you just try to mill your opponent out instead of like halfway milling them and then playing this random 5/5 that you're going to try to like beat down with all of a sudden and just completely change the role of your deck like in the middle of the game. It seems a little odd to me.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like the other deck I played against was a blue-black mill running Jace's Phantasm and the black monster. I forgot its name. So the thing is, if you're playing a blue-based mill deck, all you want is to mill your opponent. As you said, if all of a sudden your planes changes and you start beating face, well, you already took at least 4 slots, which you could be playing mill spells on, and if you're playing a mill deck, all of the opponent's removal spells are are what's the word? Are
They're just dead.
yeah, they're dead cards. And all of a sudden, you present a creature, so the opponent just looks at, oh, my Doomblade works now. Oh, my I don't know, my Journey to Nowhere makes sense now. So I don't know, man. If you want to play a mill deck, just play a mill deck. It's not very good of a deck if you don't have a clear vision of what you are trying to accomplish with the cards you have on your hand, and in your library. If you're playing a deck that has to change plans all the time in order to accomplish something, which is, of course, winning the game, it's not a very good deck, because you don't have a straight path you have to follow. I mean, of course, there are decks that we have various and different lines of play, but what I'm talking about is my main plan is to mill my opponent. Why the hell would I have a 5/5 flying creature that comes out maybe as soon as turn 2 or 3, if we are very lucky to have our mill spells in hand in the early game? Why not keep milling the opponent, bringing on Jace's Erasure, maybe playing fog-like effects, splashing green for them, playing the fog deck. What is the name of this deck? The blue-green fog.
It's yeah, I can't remember what the deck is. I've lost to it before. It's just like the blue-green turbo fog deck.
Yeah, turbo fog. Yeah.
Yeah.
So which I think is a very, it's a at least a better deck than mono blue mill or blue black mill. So though Jace's Phantasm seems to be a very cool and, I mean, flavorful card, it's underwhelming. It just doesn't perform as well in a deck that's trying to have a alternative way of winning the game. I don't know. It's just not my taste, and all the times that I have seen it, the card being played, it was quite underwhelming and sometimes useless card.
Yeah. We're running a little close to time here, so we're going to move on to our next topic. But in the vein of new creatures, keep an eye on these master sets. Keep an eye on the cards being downshifted in rarity, because that's sort of how Wizards of the Coast is shaking up our format. Whether they're doing it on purpose or not, I don't know. But keep an eye out for downshifted rarities. We've seen some pretty drastic ones. Like, I feel like there's been a couple rares that have gone from like rare to common. So
yeah, we had the elf some time ago.
There was Scion of the Wild too, I think. The 3 mana creature whose power toughness was equal to like the number of creatures you controlled or something. I want to say he was a rare, and now he is a common.
Wow, keep an eye on Seeker of the Way too. The white guy with prowess. It's a really good card, and it's being played in a lot of different decks. So keep an eye on this card, and mostly blue-white decks, because the card can be really, really good in the right home. My guess is that we'll have more decks playing this card in the future. I don't see it being played very largely right now, but it's a fine card. It's a fine creature. My guess is we will see this card being played.
Yeah, that's a really powerful card. Probably one we'll have to go more in depth on at a later time. But let's move on to our Pauper Challenge breakdown. So what we're going to do here is we're going to look at the most recent Pauper Challenge. In this case, the challenge that took place on Magic Online on the 10th, so just 3 days ago. We're going to look at the top 8 deck lists and then kind of break that down. So we've got, for our first place deck list, Blue-Red Delver. Second place, Blue-Red Delver. Third place, Tribe Combo. Fourth place,
Bird.
This is Burn. Yeah, this is just Burn. Fifth place. Let's see, what is this? Oh, this is Marasatron.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't really put deck list names, so you've got to like start looking through the deck list and trying to find the identifying cards. Sixth place, we're looking at Elves. Seventh place,
a very interesting Elves, I should add. We can talk about that later.
Yeah, we'll get to it. Seventh place, we are looking at the Kiln Fiend combo deck, and in eighth place is the this is Boros Metalcraft, right?
Boros Monarch, I guess.
Oh, is this Monarch? Yeah, I'm still honestly I'm always confused with the difference between Metalcraft and Monarch is.
Oh no, it's not. I mean, yeah, it's a Boros Monarch, but it runs Guardian of the Guildpact, which is very spicy, I guess.
Yeah, that one's interesting. Protection from monocolored. You know, it's got the Glint Hawks in it, which you need artifacts for. It has Galvanic Blast.
Yeah, it's kind of the stock list, but Guardian of the Guildpact added to the creature deck.
So this deck list is 61 cards. Is that normal?
No, it's not.
No. So he's got an extra. He's got something extra in here.
Well, I think it's the Guardian, though he has only 3 Glint Hawks. Oh yeah, the guy. I don't know if it's a guy or a girl, but the deck runs 2 Prismatic Strains main board, and 4 Journey to Nowhere, and 1 Oblivion Ring. So yeah, it's not a stock list at all. It's a very spicy one.
There's a lot of extra removal. This one of Guardian of the Guildpact is interesting. I don't know if I'm a huge fan of it, but
yeah, I don't know either. I mean, I like Boros Monarch a lot, but this list in particular, I don't know. Just 4 Journey to Nowheres and 1 Oblivion Ring seems like overkill to me. And I don't know if I am a big fan of playing 61 cards either. So
yeah, I don't know. People have told me that I'm wrong, but I'm in the camp of play 60. And it seems like that's what the overwhelming majority is. But there are some people that'll like challenge you with like playing the 61. I know that there was like a standard deck a while ago that was playing like 64 cards, and a lot of people scoffed at it. And Patrick Chapin actually just came out and was like, no, this is pure genius. This is like the one time you should be playing more than 60 cards. Like, it was mathematically correct, but I don't know when to make that call. So I just keep my deck lists at 60.
Yeah, me too. Maybe this deck list is the pure genius Boros Monarch. I don't know.
Yeah. So
should we take a quick look on the different lists?
Yeah, let's go. So the 7th place deck, the Kiln Fiend combo, nothing really stands out about it. It just looks like the regular old Kiln Fiend, Nivix Cyclops, you know, trying to kill with a bunch of spells. You've got your protection in the form of Apostle's Blessing. You know, you've got your free spells with Mutagenic Growth, and your Gush, and then, you know, the Temur Battle Rage to really go for the kill.
Yeah, and some snow-covered islands and mountains just to make your opponents feel like you're playing Delver.
Just to put the fear god in you.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about this elf list. So what's going on with this, Raphael?
Yeah, I think this is a very spicy list. I don't know if it's the most played list right now, the stock list. I don't think it is, because all the other elves decks I played against, they were just the regular stock list. This list runs only 9 forests.
Yeah.
And why is that? It's because we have land grant. 4 land grants. Should I read the card?
Yeah, go ahead. Read land grant.
So land grant, 1 generic mana, 1 green mana. It's a sorcery. If you have no land cards in hand, you may reveal your hand instead of paying land grant's mana cost. Search your library for a forest card and put that card into your hand. Then shuffle your library. So what do you think of that? What do you think about adding land grant and taking out forests of the deck? Bear in mind there is 40 creatures in the deck.
Yeah. I don't know what to make of this. The only deck I've ever played that had land grant in it was Charbelcher. And that was because we had exactly 1 land in our deck, and land grant got that land out of our deck so that we could win with the Goblin Charbelcher.
Yeah.
But this, I'm just looking at it, and
I think it's a very spicy list.
Yeah, it's interesting. What I'm missing, and you can probably point out what I'm missing here. He has 1 Mob Justice, which is a red spell, and 2 Distant Melody, a blue spell. 0 islands in the deck, and unless I'm missing something,
well,
he doesn't have any way to produce colored mana. Like, how is he producing the other colored mana?
Birchlaw Rangers.
Oh, Birchlaw Rangers. Yeah, duh. There it is, top of the list.
Yeah, tap 2 and tap the elves you control, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool.
Yeah.
So a bunch of mana dorks, and a bunch of mana dorks are the most important part of the deck, I guess. We have 3 Elvish Visionaries, which I think it's very good. It's a very good card. People don't always give the credit it deserves. It's the elf that comes into play and makes you draw a card. We have Lysa Handmaster, which is the elf that creates green elf tokens, elf warrior tokens. And the creature pack is kind of the regular ones. But we have 1 Mob Justice, as you mentioned, which is a very spicy card, because it deals 1 damage to target player for each creature you control. So tell me, Bren, is this list, or is it not, the most combo-y elves list ever?
Yeah, it just takes the combo aspect of elves to like a whole nother level with the Mob Justice and the 4 copies of Lead the Stampede and 2 copies of Distant Melody. This deck just wants to dump its hand on the table as quickly as possible, generate as much mana as humanly possible, cycle through your deck, and then just Mob Justice your opponent.
You don't even need to use Mob Justice, but it's a very nice weapon to have. I mean, you have a ton of creatures, so why not?
Yeah. I mean, it helps you. You don't have to use a combat step, which is nice. You can just kill your opponents. You can essentially just kill your opponents in the same turn you go off, because you can just generate so much mana, and then just get so many creatures into play, and then just like out of nowhere, your opponent thinks, okay, I've got another turn before he attacks me, and then you just Mob Justice them and they're dead.
Yeah, I would say that this list is the most adequate list, elves list, to be playing right now. Because it seems to me like it's though it's a combo deck, it's a very reliable one. It's a kind of a consistent deck, because you have a lot of mana dorks and you have your land grants to find your lands. Though you only have 9 forests, I don't think you need more than that, because you're running 4 land grants and, I don't know, 12 or so mana dorks. So It's a very powerful list. Some decks may have a really hard time dealing with this Elves list.
Yeah. So let's move into our fifth place deck. We've got Marasa Tron. So this is a deck trying to. It's another big mana deck, but instead of elves trying to go wide with all of its mana, this one's trying to go big with rolling thunder as its main win condition.
Yes.
It also does have like capsize, so you can get a capsize lockout on your opponents. If it's got other big cards like Mystical Teachings, Forbidden Alchemy that have really high flashback costs. But yeah, so this is the only control deck in the in this top 8.
Yeah, right. And it's a very versatile deck. Though this list is kind of strange to me because it runs Lightning Axe and Magma Spray. I would prefer to have a Lightning Bolt so I can have another win condition if I need to by flicking my wall and getting it back. It runs also Electrostatic Bolt, which is a good card. I can see why it's being played. It doesn't have Flame Slashes, which is weird. I guess Electrostatic Bolt covers for the Flame Slashes. I don't know. It's a very interesting list. I like it a lot. Though it's not the Marasa list I would like to play, and I'm playing right now in real life with Marasa. It's interesting. Nice to see Tron and its control iteration in the top 8. Very cool.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm a huge fan of the Electrostatic Bolt.
Why not?
I don't know. I just feel like I would rather just play a third Flame Slash over the like Electrostatic Bolt. Like you lose.
Yeah, it does run 2 Flame Slashes. I didn't see that.
Yeah, they're up in the sorceries, but like I mean, it's sort of just like a Magma Spray with a bit of upside. That if it's a artifact creature, you can deal 4 damage to it instead, and you lose instant speed when you go to Flame Slash, but I don't think the drawback of sorcery speed is just makes it worse than having a conditional Flame Slash, you know? So like if I'm not playing against decks with artifact creatures, I just have a bad Magma Spray.
Yeah, the fact is though that you can tutor for Electrostatic Bolt with teachings, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, that's a good reason to want it. But I don't know, maybe at that point, like, wouldn't a lightning bolt just be better?
Yeah,
Maybe?
I tend to think so, yeah. I would prefer playing a lightning bolt here.
Okay. And this is the other thing you'll probably point it out to me and I'll feel silly again. How are they discarding the lightning axe?
Well, let me check.
Oh, wait, never mind. I read lightning axe wrong. Lightning axe is as an additional cost to cast lightning axe, discard a card. For some reason, I got it confused with
it doesn't have
the madness card. Yeah. Okay.
You have to discard a card, which is reasonable. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine when you've got cards like Forbidden Alchemy, Mystical Teachings in your deck that you're fine putting in the graveyard, or even a card that you can put in the graveyard and get back later with Mnemonic Wall.
Yeah, and sometimes you really want to put something odd on the graveyard, like a land, so you can use Pulse of Marasa. So I haven't used Lightning Axe in my Marasatron lists, but it seems worth a try.
Okay. Yep. In our fourth place deck, we're just looking at the pretty typical burn deck.
With
4 firebrand archers, 4 thermal alchemists as the creatures, and then just a mess of burn spells.
yeah,
And the Curse of the Pierced Heart, which is almost like sometimes playing against Curse of the Pierced Heart feels like a one-sided sulfuric vortex.
yes,
Like
it does.
it comes down so early. Turn 2, you're just taking an extra point of damage every single turn, and like when you couple that with all the burn spells and the creatures, like that damage just adds up so quickly.
Yeah, and when you have 2 of them, it's brutal.
Yeah. So
I'm saying that because I faced that situation yesterday. It was brutal.
yeah, it is. I think important to note though that you probably don't want to be playing more than like 2 or 3 copies of this card. It's powerful in like a 1 or 2 of, but if you just get bogged down with them in your hand, like your
Yeah.
draw just becomes super clunky and just not fast enough.
Yeah, I think 2 is the right number.
Okay. Okay, and so our last non-Delver deck in the top 8 of this challenge is Tireless Tribe combo. So this is a really cool deck in my opinion. Just the deck in general, this list looks like a pretty stock list. Unless you're seeing something that sticks out to you.
Just little details that it plays 4 gushes. Normally, I would see lists playing just 3 of them, but I guess 4 is okay, unless we have something else you want to put in this spot, which I think. Oh, we took out Giga Drowses.
Yeah, that's what I was just looking for. I don't see any Giga Drowses.
So yeah, maybe taking out the 1 Giga Draws, you can play 4 gushes, but I don't think I like that very much.
I like the added protection that Giga Drowse gives you, of just being able to like tap down everything that you need to in your opponent's end step, and then untapping. And like you have days and stuff, so like you can back that up with your after your Giga Drowse turn, and I feel like it just really opens more consistent kills. Where you
Yeah,
just can set up a turn where, okay, I'm going to Giga Drowse and then I'm going to win.
yeah, definitely. So I don't know, maybe 4 gushes is a bit odd. I would advise just 3 of them and maybe 1 Giga Draws.
Yeah, I agree. Gush is sort of, it's super powerful when you draw 1, but when you draw multiples, it's really bad. Especially in a deck like this, like Tireless Tribe, where you're not necessarily wanting the game to go really long.
Well, you can always discard them, but
yeah, you can always discard extra gushes, but it's still going to get awkward. Like when you think that that gush could be another spell that you could be actually using this turn for some value, and instead it's just another gush and you're just discarding it. And even when you're not in a position where you're trying to combo off, having too many gushes in your hand can get really bad when you don't have enough islands to return. And it just creates really slow, clunky draws. So I think 3 is probably a good number in Tireless Tribe.
so too.
All right, so let's talk about our first and second place decks. We'll kind of lump them together because they are the same deck list, I think.
Yeah, main deck, they are exactly the same.
Yeah.
Just sideboard differences.
Yeah, so differences in the sideboard. Our first place list has 2 Gorilla Shaman. The second place list has 1. The first place list has no Martyr of Sand, Martyr of Ashes, and 1 Relic of Progenitus. Oh, but so does the second place list.
Yeah, I guess the difference is just Martyr of Ashes
yeah,
and Gorilla Shaman.
Gorilla Shaman. So,
So Martyr of
Martyr.
Ashes, I don't think it has a place in this deck. What do you think?
Well, it's interesting. I think it's actually quite good. Um, you have a ton of creatures with flying between the Delvers, the Fairies, and the Spell Center Sprites. And your non-flying creatures, which are Ninja the Deep Hours and Augur Bolus, like you don't really care about your Augur Bolus dying, and your Ninja the Deep Hours will often be ninja'd out after the fact. But the Martyr of Ashes is kind of like being able to play Rough Tumble in your Legacy Delver deck. You know, kills all the creatures but keeps your Delver alive.
But
I
isn't
think it's quite
Swirling
good.
Sandstorm a better card? I mean, in this deck, because by playing Martyr of Ashes, the opponent can just make you sack it, can kill it before you can activate it profitably. So Swirling Sandstorm seems to be like a more a more reliable spell to have.
Yeah. What was the name of the card? Shredding Sandstorm?
Swirling.
Oh, Swirling. I don't
Yeah.
even know this card.
Swirling Sandstorm.
Swirling Sandstorm. Threshold. Swirling Sandstorm deals 5 damage to each creature without flying. Well, I think the drawback there is Threshold, so you need to get Threshold.
Which is not that difficult in Blue-Red Delver.
It's not that difficult, but it's not that easy either. You don't have cards like Thought Scour fueling your thresholds, and so you've got to kind of let the game go long. And sometimes you just don't have time to let it go that long. And the thing with like the Martyr of Ashes is just play it on turn 3. You spend turn 1 and 2 setting up with your flyers, play your Delver on turn 1, and a Fairy Miscreant or something on turn 2. And then on turn 3, you can drop the Martyr of Ashes and immediately pay 2 mana for it and use it.
Yeah, maybe against Stompy, it's way much better. Guess you're right.
Yeah. But anyway.
So yeah, that was the top 8, right?
Yep. So that was our top 8 breakdown, or from our Pauper challenge. So let's close up the show. Let's move into what are we playing. Raphael, if you were to play a Pauper challenge tonight, what would you be playing and why?
Oh, if I would play tonight, I mean, I guess I would probably stick to Blue-Red Delver because I have been playing it for the last weeks or so. I mean, I haven't had awesome results with it. My best results were just 3-2s. But I still think the reasoning behind this choice is that Blue-Red Delver is kind of, as I said before, a neutral deck that I can trust to if I play properly, to have at least some chances of winning some games, independent of what decks I am facing. So yeah, that would be my choice because it's a very fun deck to play. It's very skill intensive. It's a very rewarding deck, and it's a very, very good deck. But yesterday, I went to my LGS to play Pauper Tourney. And my deck of choice was Blue-Green Tron. Its combo version. I went 2-2, sadly. And I lost to Mono Blue Delver. And I lost to Burn. Both pretty much tough matchups for Blue-Green Tron. And I ended up beating Izzet Blitz and Boros Monarch, which are kind of a good matchups for us. So yeah, I would be playing Blue-Red Delver online, but right now, in real life, I'm enjoying a lot playing Tron. My next LGS tourney will be with Murasa Tron, and I'm looking forward to it because I like playing the deck very much. It's like a very skill-intensive deck and very hard to pilot, but very fun and rewarding. So how about you, Brennan? If you would play a league today, what would you play and why?
Well, I am actually going to be playing a bit in the league. I started League yesterday, and I'm playing with Blue Black Teachings.
Sweet.
Yeah, it's my favorite deck in the format. It's a lot of fun to play, but it's really challenging, like we alluded to earlier. Like you've really got to understand your spots, what cards you need to fight over with counter magic, what you need to save removal for. But when you have a clear understanding of that, I've actually had a lot of success with the deck, despite the fact that I don't think it's very well positioned. But I think it's my favorite deck, and so it's what I play with a lot. If I were to play a Pauper challenge, I would definitely be sleeving up Blue Red Delver.
Great.
All right, well, thanks everybody. That was the show. Hope you enjoyed listening. You can join us again next week, where Raphael and I will be talking more about our favorite format, Pauper. So, Raphael, where can the listeners find you?
Well, I just set up an account on Twitter at Raphael CK Podcast. Raphael is spelled Rafael. So you can find me there. May I do a little shout out here before I go?
Yeah, please.
So yeah, I would like to make a shout out to my buddy GL Nemesis, who is also from Brazil. He's a very talented player, and he's lately he had a very nice result in a Pauper challenge a few weeks ago, playing Mono Black, and it was awesome. People freaked out because Mono Black is now back again, mostly thanks to him. And I've played a league match against him, and he was such a nice guy. And he said he'll listen to our show too. So shout out to you, GL Nemesis, Brazil, and nós. That's it.
Awesome. Well, you can find me also on Twitter. I'm at bclark_CK. And you can follow the podcast at CK Podcast MTG. Again, quick shout out to our sponsor, Pure MTGO. Check them out for some awesome content. But thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Ciao.